Yes, thanks a lot. We'll start sharing our monitor and then we'll start right away. Can you see our screen now?
Yes.
Nice, perfect. Then let's go, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having us. Max Tretter, my colleague, and I, Michael Hahn, we work at the Chair of Systematic Theology, so basically in ethics in Erlangen in Germany. And today we want to talk about transcending contexts, theological ethical reflections on virtual, augmented, and extended realities. So first, we need to start with two confessions. First, we may have promised you a bit too much for our rather short talk. So instead of covering VR, AR, and XR today, we'll focus solely on augmented reality and explore how this technology contributes to transcending contexts. And second, our work is a work in progress. So we'll present you some preliminary thoughts that we are working on, but they are not yet full details. So we are really looking forward to the exchange and the discussion with you in the end. But now let's start with a definition of our key concept, AR. Since different scholars use different definitions and there's no consensus on this, let's just agree on a few basics so that we all know what we are talking about. When I think of AR or augmented reality, the first thing that comes to my mind is Google Glass. You can see it on the left, on the slide on the left. Google introduced the glasses in 2012, and when users wear them, they provide them with information directly in their field of vision. This means that you have a kind of an overlay with context-relevant information over the physical environment in real time. And there are more examples like the picture in the middle. This shows the measurement application on an iPhone where I measured my desk in the office. Or at the right side, there is a GIF from Google Maps showing you the way to your destination as an overlay in the real world. In all cases, with AR, virtual elements are added to your perception of the physical environment surrounding you. However, by adding those virtual elements, you don't just add something to your context, but you transcend the current context and a recontextualization takes place. So imagine, like you can see on the slide, seeing a big turtle floating in front of you in your living room. You can walk around it and look at it from different angles and be amazed. And obviously, a real-life turtle would not just appear in your flat, partly because it wouldn't survive in that context. But when we look at this AR experience through the context lens, two things can be noted. So first, you transcend your context by using AR applications. You don't just sit on your sofa and look at some photos of turtles in a biology book, but you have the turtle like on the slide in 3D life-sized in front of you. And you can walk around, you can view it in detail from different angles and also compare it to other AR animals, which you can display next to it. Thereby, your context changes and you transcend your mere living room. And second, this has an impact on your context as well. So what do we mean by that? Well, if we stick to the turtle example, your living room is no longer just a space where you relax after work. It's now sort of an aquarium or a classroom where you can watch turtles and other sea creatures and learn about them. So the virtual elements have an impact on your context and they can change it. And overall, we can conclude AR applications allow us to transcend our context and thereby transform it.
Yeah, now that Michi has shown us how AR technologies allow us to transcend our physical context and how they can recontextualize our environments by adding virtual elements to them. And as fascinating as this technology might be on the one side, for example, if a turtle appears in your office or something like that, it can also lead to several problems, and these issues arise especially when virtual elements lead us to forgetting our real-world contexts or when virtual and real-world contexts clash. What do I mean by this? Let me illustrate it with a prominent example of AR. So who of you still remembers Pokemon Go? You know, the smartphone game that makes virtual Pokemon appear in your surroundings, which you can then see in your context using your smartphone and AR technology, and more important, you can actually catch them. At its peak, the game had nearly 150 million monthly users, making it one of the most used AR applications worldwide up to this day. And I don't know about you, but for me, the game evoked massive nostalgic memories. I mean, who amongst us Generation Y kids, and there are several others here, hi Madeleine, who of us didn't want to become a Pokemon trainer back in the day, catching the Pokemon, training them, and be the very best like no one ever was. For many people, the game helped them go outside, touch some grass, get their 10K plus daily steps in, meet new people, and become part of a bigger community. How? By transforming their environment into a Pokemon world, recontextualizing it by adding cute little creatures. But actually, I wanted to focus on the downsides of such AR recontextualization, not just rave about Pokemon. Of course, some of you might have read there have been several cases of trespassing into private or even military property, or even deaths related to Pokemon Go. But that's not the example I want to focus on. Instead, I want to focus on a special case where the AR context of Pokemon Go clashed with real life. And the prominent case I want to make is Pokemon Go in concentration camps. When the game was first launched, it spawned Pokemon everywhere with hardly any exceptions. And that's why for a short period of time, it was actually possible to catch Pokemon in former concentration camps. And the big problem is many visitors also did so. This problem became so big that in the late 2010s, the Auschwitz Memorial officially asked people via Twitter and other social media channels to refrain from playing Pokemon Go on their grounds, just out of respect for the site and the people murdered there. I think the example kind of speaks for itself, and I don't need to elaborate long and broad on why there's a massive clash of context happening there, and why such recontextualization of concentration camps by Pokemon Go, basically turning them from memorial sites into playgrounds and battle arenas, is inappropriate and highly tasteless.
Yes, so now that we've seen how augmenting contexts can be dangerous, inappropriate, or straight up tasteless, like Max said, we might ask, how can we avoid this? And can theology propose criteria for how to use augmenting technologies in a good and responsible manner? And our answer is, of course we can, and we want to explain to you why. When you use a head-mounted display like Google Glass or the recently released Apple Vision Pro and augment your reality, you transcend your original context. And by transcending the unaugmented real world, your surroundings in your living room, for example, there are changes in contexts. And this basic structure of switching contexts, of recontextualizing your current context is well known to theologians. Interestingly, the same or at least very similar structures can be found in the Christian tradition. And let me give you just one example. When you think of meditation and spiritual practices like prayer, you can say you transcend your context. You transcend the physical world to enter a conversation with God. You sort of leave your surroundings behind you to be in the presence of God. And by transcending your context, a recontextualization takes place. So maybe you experience how you're changed after a prayer, or how you're more relaxed, or how questions have been clarified. So this is just one example that shows us that for Christianity, different contexts, switching between them, and recontextualizing oneself have always played a central role in key practices of Christianity. But how do we get from here to criteria for handling different contexts and switching between them? And for this, we think we can look at theology, the scientific reflection on religion. So theology is also concerned with such contextual questions, and it provides guidelines on how to best approach these contextualizations. For instance, in biblical studies, scholars consider how to best understand texts written in a foreign context in today's context. So in other words, how can we understand biblical texts and their historical background from our modern perspective? There is, with no doubt, a gap between the times where the Bible was written and our perception of the world about 2000 years later. But as we still believe that the Bible offers us valuable insights for our modern context, we ask, how to understand those texts and how they can help us reinterpret our present. And thereby, those different contexts can benefit from each other. But this is not limited to biblical studies or the historical context. In public theology, we also think about contextual questions. Specifically, we consider how theology and the church, both religious contexts, should relate to the public sphere, which is a non-religious context. Many public theologians assume that they are expected to express their theological views on socially relevant issues, such as climate change or migration, in a secular public sphere. And that's why they focus on the possibilities of translating their theological thoughts into a non-religious context. However, this brings its own set of problems.
Yeah, a counter-proposal which we find much more productive has been developed by Peter Daybrock and is called transparticularization. Now, transparticularization is not only a difficult word, but also a highly extremely concept. It's complicated. A bit simplified and applied to public theology, it suggests that church representatives and theologians should not primarily try to make people in a secular context understand their theological thoughts better. Instead, the main focus should be to use foreign contexts as an opportunity to view myself in a new light, to question myself, and to gain a new understanding of myself, my thoughts, and my context. In other words, for transparticularization, the public sphere is not primarily a context to preach into, rather it's a context to be used to question myself and seek new understanding about myself and my context. And now the question arises, what can this concept of transparticularization teach us about artificial reality, augmented reality, or how can transparticularization serve as a criterion to distinguish good from bad AR recontextualization? We're nearly finished, no worries. I'd say if virtual elements help me to question myself, understand my real-life context better, and provide new perspectives of myself and my real-life context, then this is excellent. Then we have a good AR application. To come back to the example of concentration camps, there's an app called the Liberation AR. And this app guides visitors through the Dachau concentration camp, showing them original documents, photos from back then, and information about the camp and its liberation. And it helps make the memorial site and its history more vivid and thought-provoking, and I'd say is a good example of good AR. However, if augmentation leads me to losing myself and becoming alienated from my context, possibly putting myself into danger or losing respect for my surroundings, then the AR application is highly sus. And this is what happened with Pokemon Go at Auschwitz. Instead of getting to know the memorial site, reflecting on it, and being put into question by it, I'm distracted by the augmentations. The memorial site then ceases to be a place for remembrance and reflection and becomes a playground for self-alienation, which is why this might not be a good AR application. Of course, this criterion of transparticularization for AR is rather vague. Does, for example, a turtle in my living room prompt me to self-reflect and better understand my context? Or does it merely distract me? And is distraction really always bad? Or are there maybe also some good forms of distraction? Since we recognize that these are absolutely valid questions, we do not want to conclude here, but rather transition into the discussion. What do you think of AR and our concept to use transparticularization and self-questioning as a criterion for good AR recontextualizations? And as we know, we've presented a lot in our presentation. We have a summary slide where all of the claims we made are summarized at once. Thank you for listening to us. I hope we didn't break the timeline.